and this time legal.
Tombstone wasn't just another Western revival, it was a showdown between chaos and genius, a film forged in gunfire, both on and off the set. What audiences saw was smooth charm and grit. What they didn't see was the blood feud behind the camera, rival directors clashing and actors battling exhaustion. From script rewrites to near mutinies, the road to Tombstone was as lawless as the town itself. Here are 20 weird facts about Tombstone that prove making it was wilder than the OK Corral itself. The original director was fired in the dust. The shootout started before cameras rolled. Screenwriter Kevin Jarre was supposed to direct Tombstone, but his perfectionism slowed production to a crawl. He wanted historically accurate costumes hand-sewn and actors rehearsing in heavy wool under Arizona heat. After just a few weeks, the cast began to revolt. The studio panicked and fired him. George P. Cosmatos was brought in quietly, but Jarre's script remained mostly untouched. Kurt Russell later admitted he ghost-directed most of the movie himself, shaping tone pacing and even camera setups. The credit went to Cosmatos, but behind the scenes, it was Russell running the show like Wyatt Earp taking control of a town gone mad. Val Kilmer nearly died filming the role. Doc Holliday looked dangerously sick for a reason. Val Kilmer dehydrated himself and lost weight to capture the pale, ghostly presence of the dying gunslinger. Filming in the blistering Arizona heat pushed him close to collapse. Kilmer insisted on staying in character between takes, slurring words and trembling, even when the camera wasn't rolling. Crew members worried he'd faint before finishing his scenes. He later joked that Doc Holliday haunted him for months after production. That wasn't far from truth. Kilmer's eerie realism made Doc both tragic and terrifying, an echo of mortality in a film full of bravado. Kurt Russell edited the film in secret. After shooting wrapped, Kurt Russell discovered the studio planned to cut Tombstone into a generic action western. Determined to protect its soul, he spent months in the editing room reworking scenes himself. He trimmed dialogue, reordered flashbacks, and emphasized the brotherhood between the Earps. Russell called it his personal duel with Hollywood bureaucracy. The result was a film that balanced gunfights with emotion, raw masculinity with vulnerability. Most people never knew Russell shaped Tombstone into the version that became iconic. His quiet control saved it from becoming another forgotten Western relic. The mustaches were real and a nightmare. Every actor in Tombstone sported thick, authentic mustaches grown over months of preparation. They looked great on camera, but were torture in the desert heat. Sweat mixed with dust, creating constant irritation and breakouts. Sam Elliott later said he could taste dirt every time he spoke. Makeup artists had to clean and reshape the mustaches daily like sacred relics. No fakes allowed. The studio wanted rugged realism and got it. By the end of shooting, most of the cast swore they'd never grow facial hair again. Those mustaches became symbols of commitment and misery intertwined. The script was almost a 4-hour epic. Before the cuts, Tombstone was a sprawling Western saga nearly 4 hours long. Kevin Jarre envisioned it as a historical epic tracing the full lives of the Earp brothers from Kansas to Arizona. Entire subplots explored Morgan Earp's personal demons and Doc Holliday's New Orleans past. Studio executives panicked when early cuts dragged past 3.5 hours. They forced Russell and Cosmatos to condense it into a lean 2-hour runtime. What remained was tension-packed perfection, but dozens of pages of dialogue and gunfights vanished. Somewhere out there, Jarre's original script still whispers of a Tombstone the world never saw. Michael Biehn's intensity terrified everyone. Michael Biehn didn't just play Johnny Ringo, he became him. Castmates described him as possessed on set. He refused small talk, avoided the crew, and practiced his Latin duels for hours alone. During one scene, Biehn improvised a sinister hand gesture that wasn't in the script. It rattled Val Kilmer so much that the crew applauded when the take ended. Director George Cosmatos called him the most dangerous man on set. The gun twirling, the subtle smirk, the wild eyes, none of it was acting, it was obsession. Rumors spread that Bean kept his gun loaded with blanks, even off camera, just to stay in character. When Tombstone wrapped, Bean reportedly walked off set without saying goodbye, as if Ringo had vanished into the desert forever. The gunfights were filmed with real blanks and real fear. Unlike most westerns, Tombstone used full-charge blanks, ammunition powerful enough to sound like real gunfire. The result was authenticity, but also danger. During the OK Corral sequence, shell casings flew so close they burned extras' faces. The cast performed every shot themselves without stunt doubles. Kurt Russell's ears rang for days after the first take. The sound design didn't exaggerate. Those explosions were real. Crew members wore ear protection, but actors couldn't. Director Cosmatos demanded precision. One wrong move could mean injury. The dust, the sweat, the smoke. It wasn't cinematic magic. It was raw adrenaline and chaos caught live on film. Sam Elliott nearly quit over his brother's death scene. Sam Elliott's portrayal of Virgil Earp carried quiet dignity, but filming the scene where his character loses a brother broke him emotionally. Elliott said he'd never cried so hard in a Western. The realism came from exhaustion and grief. The production schedule was brutal, and Elliott had just returned from a family funeral before shooting the scene. He wanted to walk away from the film entirely, saying the weight was too much. Kurt Russell convinced him to stay, reminding him that the scene would define the film's heart. He was right. That raw, unfiltered grief gave Tombstone its emotional core amid all the gunfire. The production nearly collapsed from heat stroke. Arizona's desert became a living hell for the cast and crew. Temperatures soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and actors in wool coats fainted daily. Medical staff treated dozens for dehydration, including Val Kilmer, who was already pushing his body to the edge for realism. Horses refused to move under the relentless sun. The film's costume designer begged for lighter materials, but the director refused. Accuracy came first. Crew members called it death by authenticity. When storms hit suddenly, sets flooded, and the entire crew had to drag soaked costumes and cameras to safety. Every frame of Tombstone cost sweat, suffering, and sometimes blood. The cast formed a secret pact against the studio. Halfway through filming, tension with the studio reached a boiling point. Executives threatened to replace Val Kilmer and cut multiple storylines to save money. In response, the main cast, Russell, Kilmer, Elliott, and Bill Paxton, formed a private alliance. They refused to continue unless the studio backed off and let the crew finish properly. Their unity worked. The studio relented, fearing bad press from firing the stars. The group reportedly toasted that night in full costume, swearing to see it through. That act of defiance saved the movie from being butchered mid-production. And before we move on, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the second half of this story gets even wilder. The next 10 facts reveal betrayals, ghosts, and one secret that rewrote Western history. Val Kilmer improvised the Latin duel scene. The Latin exchange between Doc Holliday and Johnny Ringo wasn't fully scripted. Kilmer had studied Latin in school and suggested adding it to make Holliday sound more menacing. The crew thought it was a joke, until cameras rolled. Kilmer began reciting fluent lines, and Bean responded instinctively, turning it into a verbal duel as sharp as any gunfight. Director Cosmatos was stunned, but kept rolling. The scene instantly became legendary. The tension between them wasn't acting. Both men were genuinely competing for dominance. Kilmer later said that moment captured the soul of the West, educated men using words like bullets. It's still one of the most quoted exchanges in Western cinema, born entirely from a spontaneous decision on set that no one expected. The real Wyatt Earp's ghost was said to haunt production. Crew members whispered about strange coincidences on set. Lights flickered during Earp family scenes. Props fell when Wyatt's name was spoken. One night, Kurt Russell dreamed of a man in a long coat telling him to get it right. The next day, a light fixture crashed inches from his chair. Even hardened crew members got uneasy, calling it Earp's watchful eye. Whether superstition or stress, the phenomenon became part of the movie's lore. The actors began saying a brief silent thank you before each major take. Some swore it helped, others just felt less cursed. The coincidences stopped after filming, wrapped as if the ghost finally approved of how his story was told. Dana Delaney's costume nearly set her on fire. Dana Delaney, who played Josephine Marcus, wore authentic 1880s dresses made of heavy fabric, layered over steel corsets and petticoats. During one dance scene near open torches, a spark landed on her hem. The skirt began to smolder as she twirled. A crew member rushed in just in time to douse the flame. She laughed it off, but the director banned open flames near costumes afterward. Delaney insisted on keeping the scorched fabric for continuity and finished the scene before realizing how close she'd come to disaster. That brush with danger added an eerie realism to her graceful movements. What audiences saw as elegance was actually survival instinct captured on film. Powers Booth's laugh was real rage. As Curly Bill, Powers Booth radiated madness, especially during his maniacal laugh after shooting the marshal. That laugh wasn't planned. Booth had been furious after multiple retakes in the scorching sun. When the camera rolled again, he exploded into a genuine outburst of frustration that morphed into Curly Bill's iconic cackle. The director loved it and used the take. Boothie later said the laugh came from pain and sunburn. His performance blurred reality, an actor pushed to the edge, channeling fury into brilliance. It was one of the few unscripted moments that defined an entire character through pure emotion. The Earp's gun belts were designed like real battle gear. Most Westerns use decorative gun belts, but Tombstone's props were modeled after Civil War officer holsters. They were heavy, unbalanced, and brutally uncomfortable. Kurt Russell insisted on using real-weight revolvers for authenticity, which meant hours of strain on hips and shoulders. The actors moved slower, drew guns less fluidly, and sweated under the leather straps, but it looked authentic on film. Every time Wyatt Earp's belt squeaked or sagged, that was genuine. The realism gave fight scenes a grounded tension that modern Westerns rarely achieve. The gear made men look heroic but feel broken, the same paradox that defines Tombstone itself. Jason Priestley's role was almost deleted entirely. Jason Priestley joined Tombstone fresh off Beverly Hills 90210, hoping to prove himself in a serious role. He played Billy Breckenridge, a conflicted deputy caught between law and loyalty. But studio executives panicked, fearing his teen idol fame would ruin the film's gritty tone. Half his scenes were cut before release. Priestley was devastated. His arc originally ended in a dramatic confrontation that humanized the outlaws. Even Val Kilmer lobbied to keep it. Russell later called the cuts a crime against character. Despite the lost footage, Priestley's subtle presence remains haunting. His small role became a ghost of what Tombstone might have been, a reflection of innocence corrupted by power. Bill Paxton broke down after his final scene. When Morgan Earp dies, audiences see one of the most heart-wrenching deaths in any Western. What they don't know is that Bill Paxton's tears were real. He had just learned that a close friend from another project had passed away that morning. Russell offered to delay shooting, but Paxton insisted on filming. He poured all his grief into the moment, collapsing after the final take. The set fell silent. Cosmatos called it the most honest pain ever captured on camera. That authenticity gave Tombstone its emotional gravity, violence balanced by human loss. Paxton later said he couldn't watch the scene without feeling haunted by it. The town of Tombstone was rebuilt from scratch. Instead of using standing sets, the production built an entire frontier town from the ground up in the Arizona desert. Every storefront, saloon, and boardwalk was constructed to match historical records. The decision nearly bankrupted the production, but it gave the movie unmatched realism. Dust storms constantly destroyed props, forcing the art department to rebuild entire facades overnight. Actors lived among the sets between scenes, giving their performances a sense of lived-in authenticity. The town looked like history resurrected, and it was. By the time filming ended, the set felt like a real community. Then it was left to rot, just like the original Tombstone after the gold rush faded away. The final gunfight was nearly cut for budget reasons. The final standoff between Wyatt Earp's posse and Curly Bill's gang, the film's most famous action sequence, almost didn't happen. The studio demanded major cuts, arguing that audiences didn't need another gunfight. Kurt Russell fought hard, even threatening to walk off if it was removed. He personally helped choreograph the scene and convinced Cosmatos to shoot it guerrilla style over a weekend using minimal crew. The result became the film's crowning moment. Russell's steely walk through the river, bullets flying in slow motion, defined Earp's legend. Without that fight, Tombstone would have ended as a quiet drama instead of the mythic Western it became. Val Kilmer's performance was so good, it overshadowed everyone. When Tombstone premiered, critics and audiences alike hailed Val Kilmer as the film's soul. His portrayal of Doc Holliday was so magnetic, it eclipsed the rest of the cast. Kilmer reportedly apologized to Russell, saying he never meant to steal the movie. Russell laughed and called it the best theft I ever saw. Even the real-life descendants of the Earps said Kilmer's doc was the closest to truth we'll ever see. That combination of fragility, wit, and fatalism turned a supporting role into cinematic immortality. Kilmer's doc didn't just survive the West, he conquered it. Kurt Russell secretly donated his paycheck. Here's the twist no one knew for decades. Kurt Russell gave a massive portion of his salary back to the production to keep the film alive after the budget collapsed. Crew members were being laid off and key scenes were at risk of cancellation. Russell quietly wrote checks to cover costs, refusing credit. He told one producer, "You pay the people, I'll finish the movie." That selfless act saved Tombstone from financial ruin and preserved its legacy as one of the greatest modern westerns ever made.